Welcome to the In-Flight Podcast, powered by the Canadian Owners and Pilots Association. I'm Sharon Chung, and let's go direct.
Hey everybody, welcome to episode 2. I'm joined today by Jim Ferrier, the Director of Aviation Operations at COPA, and we're going to cover some need-to-know issues that pilots need to know more about. So, Jim, why don't we start by defining your role and what you do at COPA and what's your background?
How about what I don't do at COPA, but okay.
Okay, what you don't do at COPA. That's maybe a longer list.
Yeah, no, Director of Aviation Operations role really is focused on dealing with member issues, so advocacy, dealing with government affairs issues, and from the regulator, from the air navigation service provider, medicals, licensing issues, medical issues, pretty much anything that one of our members might look at from the aspect of actually being able to get out and fly their airplane if they have any of those issues. Myself and George, who will be introduced in a future episode, take care of those issues for COPA. Background, well, I'm a retired guy, aviation guy. Started flying when I was 16, got inspired. Basically, my dad used to do a lot of traveling. I'd go to the airport and see him get on planes. And back in the days when you were able to stand outside and see them actually go, got really excited about it. Always wanted to do it. Joined the Air Cadets, managed to get both my gliding and flying license in my teens, 16, 17 years old. So have had that since. Ended up getting a career in starting in Transport Canada and Air Traffic Services as a flight service specialist. Worked in air traffic services for about 15 years and then migrated into technology and eventually management there, retiring after about 30 years with NAV in 2020 as a director, aviation information management and flight operations, and thought I was well on my way to a retirement and got convinced to come over and help COPA by a former president and have been here now a little over 3 years. GA guy all my life, so I guess it's a good fit and like coming to work every day and working on behalf of the members.
Well, knowing you, I know it's a good fit, so that's for sure. So if you had to sort of distill it down, what do you think, what are the top things that members are inquiring about or member advocacy type of things that COPA is dealing with?
Well, certainly there's day-to-day issues that we deal with. People with issues with their medicals or a question about, how do I fly transborder or licensing? Those are the fairly easy ones that we get that we can, contact the member or have a communication and say, do this, or we have a lot of good guides available and so on that can guide you through some of the processes, and we can give information that way. And usually, it's a short email or a short conversation and it can be solved. Then we get into a lot of the more complicated things where, people may have local issues with their airports or, municipalities or problems with, establishing a personal airdrome, those kind of things, and want some guidance. So those are usually a little more complicated that we try to deal with it on an individual basis. But it's really more the national issues that we have a really big focus. It's hard to get into the many different wide aspects of local issues. So we really try to focus on the big issues that are facing members today. In particular, we're seeing things, we've had issues with medicals for a while. People, challenges with timing of getting medicals, even just, first-time medicals for young people, anybody in particular that might have a pre-existing condition, those kind of things have problems. So we try to help people at least find out what the status of their files are and ask Transport Canada to clarify things where we can. We can't really force Transport Canada, obviously, to expedite something. They have to do their due diligence, but we can certainly ask and find out information for members. Bigger issues, obviously ADSB is one that for the time at least that I've been with COPA, we've been focused on, trying to define what it is exactly that's expected from the GA community. trying to have a dialogue about, please hear us. We want to operate safely in the system, have access to the system. We don't want to be excluded. So this has been one that's been ongoing for, well, if you really look at the whole ADS-B issue, well into the 20 teens when we first started talking about it. In particular, now we've got Class A and B airspace, obviously with a diversity mandate in fact, not just that it doesn't say specifically diversity, but it's really the expectation, which has been a challenge in particular Class B airspace for our members. So we're trying to, find possible future resolution to maybe have access for our members there. Our bigger worry is future into Class C, D, and E airspace and what that solution is going to look like. We know that our members fly there, and we really want to be able to provide direction and hear direction on where both the regulator and the service provider are going to go, so that our members can understand what their options are into the future. So that's a real burning issue, and there's a lot of aspects that have to be considered in that. So a lot of conversations go on around that. Another related one over the past few years has really been service denials. So we've been seeing, increasing cases where VFR aircraft, training aircraft, general aviation aircraft flying VFR not getting access to different airspace and different airports. We see this as a big problem. We understand that VFR, general aviation, is not operating on a, I'm going to say, schedule basis. So it's more difficult to manage, obviously, than scheduled air traffic. But the last time I think I read the Canadian aviation regulations, I didn't see that there was a priority put on IFR versus VFR flight. And that in a lot of cases, our members are using their aircraft for legitimate purposes, whether it's, personal travel, business purposes. In some cases, our members are, doing public benefit flying things like Hope Air or other various activities that are actually being done for the benefit of the community, but they're still being challenged to be denied access to airspace in places. So we've had a number of conversations with both the service provider, of course, NAV Canada, and the regulator, Transport Canada. In fact, having a discussion today, just before we were doing this particular podcast, about that we need to find a resolution for that, and how can our members be included. And it's not something that we obviously can't change overnight. It has to be rational conversations with rational people talking about why we need this. There's got to be a resolution for it. General aviation obviously is a large piece of the aviation industry as a whole, and generates revenue and GDP in the Canadian economy, for sure. And really does need a place and can't be excluded. So really protecting those fundamental freedoms are big ones that we certainly deal with on the advocacy point of view. But I have to go back to the biggest one, and that's safety. So our biggest role really that we try to take on is to look at how we can continue to cooperate with the regulator, other people in the industry to promote aviation safety, in particular in the general aviation space. So we are partners on the General Aviation Safety Program with Transport Canada, which started back in 2017 with the General Aviation Safety Campaign. We continue to be that partner. We have regular meetings with them. We work on content. There are 8 working groups, I believe it is now, that we're members of. Some of those working groups are our staff actually or members are chair people on those working groups. So we're very involved with those, trying to push forward, whether it's volunteer reporting, trying to find out, risks inside the general aviation community, which we might not get through other means. Could be, looking at how do we change potentially seaplane operations and things like that. So it's very widespread. That's a big part of what we do.
That's probably one of the, and I don't think members always appreciate that part of our advocacy work is not just complaining to the regulator in NAV Canada, these are our problems, but advocating to make sure that there's not over-regulation, that we're part of the solution, that we have a seat at the table when those discussions are taking place so that we're part of it, and it's not just like, here, you guys do this now. It's like, no, we want to be part of it. So I don't think members always appreciate the amount of advocacy we're doing on the front end of things to make sure that what comes out the back end of things is palatable for general aviation.
And that's really it, is what can general aviation bring to the table, but also what can be given back to general aviation. It's interesting you say, go and tell people. Obviously, inside what we do, advocacy can't be about, there's no ultimatums. We can't go to a regulator and say, we want you to do this. We have no legal authority or power to do it, which makes it, sometimes you very much want to go and say, shake them and say, wake up, and how can we get this to happen?
But I don't think people always appreciate, it's very easy to be from the outside and just say, well, if they just did this, it would fix this problem. And, I often say the hard thing about hard things is they're hard. And so, there is no easy button in this. And so sometimes our advocacy work, while it may appear to not be proceeding much, there is a lot of work going on. And sometimes even just to move the football, a yard, it takes a whole quarter, right, to move that football a yard. And I don't think members sometimes appreciate the work that you are doing, that George is doing, that I'm doing, that Sharon's doing, because we're all involved in advocacy work. But we're also involved in that safety advocacy work, and that was the other thing that, COPA is a safety organization, number one. That's really one of the reasons we exist, not just to be complainers to NAV Canada and to Transport Canada, but to make sure that we're advocates for safety and safe aviation operations in Canada. So one other thing I wanted to talk about, and this sort of segues into that, is the Freedom to Fly Fund. Everybody talks about the Freedom to Fly and what it is and what it does and what it doesn't do. But maybe just talk a little bit about what really is the modus operandi of a Freedom to Fly request.
So the Freedom to Fly Fund really started as something which was a special action fund. And that was really something that was created in order to take action when special things happened that the association needed to deal with. And that's really the fundamental piece of it. And yes, it does protect our freedom to fly, but it's talking about issues that are, of, I'm going to say, broad-ranging national importance for GA as a whole.
What might be important to you personally may not be a national importance, a thing of national importance. It might be important to you, but
exactly.
not.
And unfortunately, some of the, we see trends in certain things that, yes, it may be happening, economically or something, if we want to talk hangar rents and things like that. But those are all very locally controlled and decided, and it doesn't stem from a national regulation. And while I can understand the irritant that it comes to our members that are suddenly faced with a, increasing hangar bill or increasing access to the airport via landing fees and those things. I understand that those are fundamentally
and we're all
frustrating.
Pilots too. We're paying these same prices. It's costing us the same amount to fly as it's costing our members. So we do have a dog in that fight too, right?
Yeah, and that is frustrating, but it's local, and those really need to be driven by, our local members, and from a national point of view, we can certainly help with, background information or best practices of other airports or things like that we can help. But it's really the boots on the ground and the local issues that need to deal with those issues.
Sure. And we've been successful that way too. There's been some airports where they were having some, initially the members locally thought it was a freedom to fly kind of thing, and it really turned out to, well, no, actually we could negotiate with, I'm thinking of a hangar landlord type of situation where an airport was, doing some things that were not really great for the
certainly not best
for the
practice.
resident, not the best practices, and we helped them with that. But it really, where we were successful was being engaged with the local flights and the local flight captains and the local airport community, far more effective than coming to Ottawa and having us do anything, because it's really the boots on the ground there at the local airport.
Well, and particularly local issues, generally we don't have those kind of connections necessarily. we can, as I said, we can certainly share what we know and what we've experienced.
And we have done that. I mean, I think COPA has a lot of collateral material to help with some of those supporting of the airport economic studies and things like that are showing airports the value of having general aviation, there. And
and we've done those studies, and I'm sure that COPA will continue to do those things into the future to show the value of what GA is. So really, from the office point of view or the head office point of view, the big focus is on the national issues and freedom to fly issues. If someone was to come down, much like the service denial situation, where it appears, may be or may not be, but it appears to us that there seems to be, a decision or a conscious a pathway that says, well, VFR is the problem in particular airspace, so we're gonna say that they can't operate there. Well, that's a fundamental problem.
Yes.
Because the last time I looked in the Canadian Aviation Regulations, as they say, VFR is not given less priority than IFR. So how do we deal with those kind of things? How do we act on behalf of our members that they have, the access to the airspace or the airports or the infrastructure that really we're entitled to? Mm-hmm. And whether it's government or industry or local municipalities, whatever, trying to influence somebody's rights under the Aeronautics Act or under the Canadian Aviation Regulations. Those are things we definitely try to stand up for, try to have realistic conversations with people involved to say, we need to be part of this solution. We need to be understood in what we're doing. That's the work that we really are doing day to day in a lot of cases. Not particularly easy, as you say.
Right.
An old boss of mine who may very well be listening used to say to me, you work in an office and you don't see your pile of sticks at the end of the day. That you can't, say, I've accomplished this or I've done that because you've been in a meeting or you've been on a phone call and you may have, as you said, moved the ball a yard, but it's only a yard. And unless you see that, it's very difficult sometimes to understand.
Not every play can be a touchdown, right? I mean,
that's right.
that's the reality of it, right?
And that's a big issue for our members as well.
We're not
they
don't
see
the
pile of sticks.
Yeah.
That's right. And I mean, part of that's our problem. We're very bad at talking about what we do on a day-to-day basis.
We're very bad at broadcasting the score, right? So, right. But that's a very Canadian thing. Back to the freedom to fly. So I sort of think it might be rare that an individual would have a freedom to fly request, because I think a lot of them are going to be national interests that we're already going to be aware of on some of these things. But just walk me through what the criteria might be. What would it look like if you were to say, what would a freedom to fly request look like? What are the criteria? How do I apply for it? What would I do?
Well, I think the first question that you have to look at is what is the scope of the impact?
Right.
Is it something that, it's impacting me, or is it impacting many or globally across, the GA world, I'm going to say, or the aviation world.
A fight with your hangar neighbors probably not.
Unfortunately, no. And don't get me wrong, it's not that we're unsympathetic about it. As you said, we have our skin in the game as well as pilots.
And sometimes we can help. It's not maybe not a freedom to fly, but maybe we can help.
Exactly. And I mean, so generally we look at, okay, is it something that has a broad ranging impact to, the industry, the association, basically an individual's ability to access GA, whether it's like saying you can't have an airport there or these kind of things that are, there are certain rules and regulations. So I think you need to step back and say, is there an impact to the legislation, for example, that members are entitled to services under, again, the Aviation or Aeronautics Act or the Canadian Aviation Regulations? Is there changes that are happening there? Which is a huge part of the thing that we do also, is we're constantly watching the CARE Act process and the announcements on changes to the regulations and so on to see and say, is that going to impact how we can operate as, a GA pilot. The latest one was last year, I guess, but was this night VFR rules, which, had the opportunity to basically eliminate VFR flight for general aviation pilots, which was a completely unacceptable proposal from the regulator.
Right.
Those are the kind of things in scope that generally we would be looking at a freedom to fly, type challenge.
And actually, I think members forget, too, that they're voters, right? So I think that's one thing that the membership of COPA that's a little bit different than a lot of associations is that we don't have a lot of businesses that our membership is based of. But what we do is we have a very large collection of members who vote. So oftentimes telling your MP, hey, I'm a pilot, general aviation is important to me in Canada, it should be important to you. And that's a very powerful thing that I think sometimes we as COPA members, not COPA as the association, but COPA members forget, hey, I should be writing a letter. If I'm not happy what's happening at the airport here, I should be writing my municipality, I should be writing my MP, I should be writing my MPP or my MLA or whoever's your provincial representative and let them know aviation's important to me and it should be important to you.
Definitely the power that's there, and we've seen that. And then, perfect example is the one that I was just talking about was the night VFR that we actually reached out to the membership and said, we need you to send in your individual responses to the regulator in this particular case because we speak as one. We're one response, which means that the regulator or government looks at it one time and gives one answer. But if you have a different way that you look at it and you write individually and exercise your rights, it's something else they have to consider and they have to deal with. So there is a lot of power by the individual members, and we need to remember that. But
the members need to remember that too. That that's one of the biggest things I think we have to recognize as members of COPA. It's what we are doing, right? So. One thing that I see is advocacy work that we do a lot of because I see it, and is that sometimes we just know who to talk to, right? So sometimes our advocacy work is just like, hey, I have this problem, and we say, we have a network of people, and that's the beauty of being a member of the association, is we have a network of people. So you might not know, but I might know somebody to talk to, and if I don't know, might know somebody else who might know, right? I was just involved in a local airport. That was looking that they have a municipality that's sort of thinking about, are we going to close the airport or whatever? And we have access to people who are experts in that thing, that when they have a conversation about it, it immediately doesn't short circuit or make it goes away, but it makes the conversations easier because we have somebody with experience who's already done this, right? And that's one of the added benefits of COPA membership and advocacy work is sometimes calling Jim or George or me. It's really just, I don't know the answer, but I know who might have the answer because there's somebody who definitely has probably already gone down this path and they can help you. Right?
Yeah, and I mean, the other thing too is the association, because of what it is, has, the doorways to go through and access people, whereas simply a member of the public wouldn't have that access.
Even what we do with medicals on a daily, weekly, monthly basis, we can't solve your medical problems, right? We can't make them go away.
No.
We can't. But what we can do is we can ask the questions and help and maybe get someone to look at it and maybe, get that. So we can help you, but we can't do it for you, right? And that's the one thing about your COPA membership is you have to think, what have I done, right? So when I'm calling Jim and saying, hey, Jim, I have this problem, really the first question we sometimes ask is, well, what have you done? Because, oftentimes the power exists within either the flight or the COPA or personally with the COPA membership.
Well, and I think that's something that we usually do when we're trying to understand a situation is, what is the situation? What have you done? We obviously want to know what you want or expect from us.
Everybody thinks we have a magic wand and we can just do this and boom.
Again, I'd love to have one,
that too. Yeah, me
but
too.
I don't. again, we have access to legal advisors who can give us background information. Certainly, if we start to look at freedom to fly requests, that's actually one of our big thresholds. Is we generally go to our legal counsel and say, is this something that you see as being a big enough threat to general aviation that we should become involved in this or not? And we obviously need to rely on our legal experts on their understanding of the legality of things. And unfortunately, when it comes to advocacy, a lot of it is we're talking about what our hopes and wishes are of our members, which, as much as we want to be sympathetic and probably have the same hopes and wishes, it's very difficult to go to, in particular, a regulator with a hope and wish if you can't tie it to something that's regulatory or safety focused, and have a positive outcome from those discussions, because you have to base things on what exists in regulation or law in order to find some kind of solution to what it's at. Simply hoping or wishing that that's the way that I want it, we can't. We don't have the authority or the ability to go and change a municipality if they decide plan to close an airport. If they've done that and their voters in their municipality have said yes, municipal council do that, we can try to convince them otherwise and show them the pathway that we would like to see and show them the benefits that are there. But ultimately, if their decisions are made, we really don't have, in a local issue like that, a recourse to stop it, right? So.
Thank you, Jim. There's plenty more to come in our new In-Flight podcast, and that is coming up on a future episode. So thank you, Jim.
Thank you.
Have a hot take, a share-worthy aviation fact, or a burning general aviation question? Call us at 613-236-4901 and leave a voicemail for a chance to be featured on COPA's new In-Flight podcast.